Hey everybody, I'm back with another audio essay. This week I'll be reading my latest, titled Canadian Obituary. As always, hang around once I'm done reading and I will provide some additional context and background to what I wrote. And if you haven't already, please subscribe at bravenewnormal.substack.com. I do not send spam emails or calls to action or any of that stupid shit. Anything you receive from me will either be a new podcast episode or an essay or something that you might actually find useful. So if you haven't, please sign up, bravenewnormal.substack.com. You can sign up as a paid subscriber or for free. But if you sign up as a paid subscriber, there is a lot of additional paid-only content on the way. It will be a lot more frequent now that the election is over and I do not have the crushing weight of covering it hovering over me. So sign up, bravenewnormal.substack.com, or you can follow me on Instagram and X at JasonJamesBNN. I have the same username on both platforms, and I'm pretty active on both. So yeah, anyways, follow me, subscribe if you can, and let's get into it. Canadian Obituary. Death of a once mediocre middle power. The absence of hope, completely surrounded in a zombie apocalypse. Canadians have an insatiable desire for self-immolation. They're desperately clinging to a fantasy that decayed during the last 40 years and crumbled under the soft, pedicured heels of Justin Trudeau. They're willfully blind to the reality staring through their vapid eyes, many of whom are in the closing years of their lives. They voted for massively inflated housing prices in the aspiration of selling to a numbered Chinese company and purchasing a condo near the beach in Boca Raton, and in doing so, doomed their children to a lifetime of crushing tax debt and wage slavery. They voted in favor of preserving their own delusions over the vitality of future generations. I take solace in knowing their children and grandchildren will quietly resent them long after they're gone. Their legacy will be one of limitless indulgence and stupidity. Liberal baby boomers aren't the only ones to blame for this. There's a vast number of millennials and Gen Xers who were radicalized by the constant flow of platitudes that slithered out of leftist institutions when Barack Obama first flashed his charismatic smile in front of a camera. They casually ignored his robbery of the American people to bail out the parasites who robbed the American people for the sake of maintaining the utopian myth. When conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper carefully guided Canada through the global economic crisis, he was thanked with accusations of racism and social insensitivity because he wouldn't shift focus from avoiding our country's near-certain death onto the trivial political trends liberals were amplifying to mask their bludgeoning of the middle class. I saw it as it happened. I broke from the left and wrote it down. I paid a mighty price in my career as a writer. Americans learned a valuable lesson. It took 8 years of hegemonic terror behind the sparkly veneer of Obama, and another 4 years of domestic chaos under Biden, but it eventually crystallized in their minds. Canadians had a full decade to grasp the same realization, yet we refused to retain any of it. The stereotype of the plaid-wearing, bumbling idiot once again rings true. These are the zombies that make up roughly half of Canada's population. Brainless wanderers who've outsourced their consciousness to a suicidal death cult. Human jukeboxes programmed to play the greatest hits and narratives promulgated by government-funded media. Independent thinkers can predict and recite their viewpoints verbatim. They are the science worshippers, or more accurately, the worshippers of magic disguised as science by sinister religious leaders. Mark Carney is not a politician. He's a central banker. A member of an elitist class that has sought to dominate Western nations since the beginning of the First World War. This is a publicly known fact, yet will be refuted by zombies because it contrasts the established dogma. Carney was a cardinal in the Church of Net Zero until suddenly, and suspiciously, he was ordained a high priest by the unseen forces behind the Order of Anti-Human Orthodoxy. The cult accepted his ascension, despite Carney never having held a seat in Canadian Parliament and no rational explanation for his entry into politics. What interest does a financial mercenary have in ruling over a failing middle power? Because he's Canadian, so said the prophecy. But perhaps it has to do with a tyrannical agenda that imploded in the wake of the COVID pandemic, and an American president across the border who became a symbol of rebellion against this agenda. Carney's Brookfield asset management firm gifted this president's son-in-law a $1 billion loan to save a bad real estate deal, and therefore, Carney's arrival could be a signal from the unseen forces to this American president that he should simmer down a little. Maybe it was the billions Carney invested in China's fossil fuels and real estate, and his investments in Western renewable energy projects. With the public's attention to man-made climate change beginning to wane, and the growing awareness of China's influence over Canadian politicians and industries, somebody had to step in and slap the blinders back onto curious zombies. But no, the British-Irish citizen, American financier, Bermudan money launderer, heard the cries from helpless Canadians and jackhammered his way through our convoluted parliamentary system to save us from Trump. He is Canadian, after all. He wears hockey jerseys and drinks beer and speaks garbled Quebecois French. He's just like us. Ironically, it was the fear of Trump that motivated cowardly beaver-tailed bedwetters to vote for Carney. Pierre Poilievre blew a 25-point lead because he played the Liberals' game in their arena. He would have been wise to lean into the outlandish Liberal comparisons of him to Trump and position himself as the person best suited to negotiate a new trade deal with the United States. It was Vice President J.D. Vance's appearances on popular American podcasts that arguably helped seal a victory for Trump, and Poilievre needed to follow the same path. There were many who reportedly extended the invitation, and his campaign turned them all down. Instead, Poilievre diluted his platform to broaden his appeal and relied on traditional media to deliver the message, the same traditional media he vowed to defund if elected. It was a horrific battle plan, and one that should be studied by political science students decades into the future. Poilievre and his dim-wit advisors managed to bring a never-before-seen momentum to a grinding halt months before a single ballot was cast. He was a genius populist who dunked himself into a vat of establishment slime with the expectation that the electorate would be magnetized to the opposite of what generated his appeal to begin with. He lost to a largely unknown corporate stiff in dad jeans who couldn't give a substantive answer to any of the softball questions lobbed gently toward him. We needed the combative, unapologetic Pierre Poilievre. We received a sloganeering insurance salesman who attempted to fight Carney's fear of the 51st state with more fear. The zombies on the brink of an awakening went back into their trance. Mark Carney isn't a Canadian. He's a globalist. He was Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, and the man at least partially responsible for the devastation we've suffered through. But unlike Trudeau, Carney isn't a sociopathic narcissist concerned only with his public image. He's a cold, calculated killer. He doesn't care about optics. He isn't one of us, nor will he make any effort to be one of us now that he's secured the top seat in our country. He views himself as something better, something above the average person. There is no amount of outrage that will stop him and his Liberals from ramming the same authoritarian bills through Parliament that Trudeau couldn't pass because of his selfish need to be loved and respected. Mark Carney doesn't want your respect. He demands your obedience. And he will take it by force if necessary. We are about to find out what a controlled demolition looks like. Canada has become the Walking Dead. Okay, so I wrote this one in about an hour, maybe 2 hours, the day after the election. I really wanted to take time with it, actually. I was planning on not putting it out there for like a couple of weeks because I wanted to think through my emotions and really give something of substance. But the words just flowed, man. And this is one of those pieces that as a writer, you always want to write. Like, you know, you have the burn inside and the words are just flowing because you're just so zeroed in and focused on the message you're trying to send. And I think the message in this essay is pretty clear. I'm still kind of like looking back over the last few months and wondering what went wrong. And I mean, I lay it all out here. I think, you know, what went wrong, obviously, is that there is a large chunk of the Canadian population that are holding on to something that's gone, long gone, died years ago. But they still live in this fantasy world, or at least are want to live in that world, even though they know instinctually that it's gone forever, or at least for now. And I was never a Pierre Poilievre fanboy. I saw his flaws immediately. But now that the election is over, I can be a little bit more critical of him. I was careful during that time because I know that my voice and the things that I write have a substantial reach, and I didn't want to present anything that would make people lose faith in Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, because I truly did see them as Canada's only opportunity to get back to baseline, you know, some some semblance of normalcy. But Poilievre's problem was that he became a politician. And, you know, people listening to this, yes, Poilievre is a career politician, but where he shines is when he is a populist and he speaks directly to the people. Poilievre is best when he's just himself. And if you notice, during the 2 years that Poilievre was campaigning, all of the stuff that they did that got the most attention were just clips of him standing, you know, off on the side of a highway talking to, you know, protesters, or in an orchard confronting a weaselly journalist. And I put journalist in quotes because that guy's not a journalist. He's a propagandist. Or when he's, you know, at one of his campaigns talking to constituents and hearing their stories. That's where Poilievre really shined through and where he really connected and related to the Canadian people. Pierre Poilievre has a real story. He was adopted. He has a child with autism, and I do commend him for not using any of those things to, you know, any of those emotional triggers to gain votes in this election. I really do appreciate that he stuck to policy and he stuck to his vision for the future. But the thing about Pierre Poilievre is that he's relatable when he's just talking and when he's just conversating with people. And, you know, all of the glossy, polished campaign ads that the Conservatives put out during this really long campaign, none of us remember any of them because they're overproduced. And that's where Poilievre fails, because he's not that guy. He's not a manufactured, fabricated politician. And when he tries to do it, he loses everyone. And he lost me. I voted for him in the Conservatives because I thought the alternative was much, much worse. And I still believe that, as you just listened to. But he lost my attention. He lost a lot of my respect during these last 3 months of his campaign, because he turned on the politician shtick. And as I say here toward the end of the essay, you know, he dunked himself in a vat of establishment slime to try to broaden his appeal. Now, I do understand why he did that. Canadians, whether you like to hear it or not, those of you listening, are hopelessly naive. Canadians do not understand the world outside of this country. In fact, I would say most Canadians don't even understand Canada. And because of that, what Poilievre had to do is he had to dumb himself down and dilute himself to be able to connect with and speak with the people who may or may not have been on the fence. But the problem is that I think those people had always planned to vote Liberal. And what Poilievre really needed to do was force his way in. And in doing that, he needed to, again, just embrace populism and be himself. And I think he would have won more of those people over, at least enough to win a minority government. But he didn't. He did the traditional Canadian political dance, which is unbelievably cheesy and corny by global standards. But, you know, his aides and his campaign team and his advisors know what mainstream Canadians are looking for, and they tried to become that. But unfortunately, Pierre Poilievre isn't that. And so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that Mark Carney didn't win the election as much as Pierre Poilievre lost. And I hope that they take this loss as a huge a learning experience, so that in 4 years, if Canada still exists, and that's a really big if, and we can get into that. I can get into that later on here in my, you know, closing rant. But if Canada still exists as a country, he needs to be a populist all the way through. He needs to lean into the Trump comparisons, because despite what the polls were showing, the rigged polls, the polls that are designed to swing Liberal no matter how you answer the questions, I think the people of Canada, I think most Canadians, although we are hurt and confused by what's happening with our relationship by the United States, and again, this is low information voters, those of us who know what's going on completely understand it. If he had leaned into that and then just said, hey, listen, guys, I do share a lot of the same views as Donald Trump, and it's because of that I understand this guy, And if you elect me as your prime minister, I can negotiate a deal that's going to be more than beneficial for Canada and fair for North America overall. I think if he had sent that message rather than stoking the flames of fear with, as I said in this essay, liberal boomers and beaver-tailed bedwetters, I think he would have been successful, man, because I think that's what people were really looking to hear. Mark Carney was always going to position himself and present himself as an adversarial figure to Donald Trump. But the truth about Mark Carney is that he's not an adversarial figure. He's in that club. And maybe some of you think that that's a good thing. But these people don't have our best interests in heart. Mark Carney sits on the board at Stripe, which is a payment processing platform, the one that I use. If you're a paid subscriber at Brave New Normal or anywhere else, that's how I get paid. And Mark Carney sits on the board there, as does Elon Musk. Elon Musk isn't on the board. He's an investor. And Mark Carney, as I outlined in this essay, gave Jared Kushner a $1 billion loan to cover a bad real estate deal in Manhattan. So you see, these people are all connected and not in the right way. The thing that made Pierre Poilievre special is that he is combative, he is unapologetic, he is blunt, and that is exactly the kind of guy that can walk into a room with Donald Trump and negotiate a deal that Canada needs. Mark Carney is a guy that will walk into a room with not just Donald Trump, really any central banker or financial figure, and will sell us out. Because Mark Carney doesn't care about Canada. The fact that Mark Carney is our prime minister now, it's just the next step in his career. He has no connection to us. And I mean, look at his history. He didn't even live in Canada. I doubt he even lives in Canada now, and I doubt he will as prime minister for the most part. He doesn't care about this country. What he cares about is money and power and enriching the people, the small circle of elitists around him that have put him where he is. And we're about to see that. Brookfield Asset Management Firm is involved in both Chinese fossil fuels and renewable energy projects in the West. He's invested in both. And so what he's going to do is he's going to use this net zero agenda to purposely crash Canada specifically, Canada's economy, destroy our economic engine, force us all onto these renewable energy products that he and Brookfield are invested in, while at the same time pumping up China's fossil fuel economy. That's what he's going to do. The whole net zero thing is a complete and total scam. The carbon cap and trade schemes, Brookfield Asset Management is involved in those carbon trades. They make money every time those carbon credits are traded. That's what this is about, money and power. And mainstream Canadians, and I refer to those people as mainstream Canadians, but the zombies, the low information voters, they were fooled completely. And now we're about to pay dearly. The only hope is that Western Canada will separate and shrink and isolate Eastern Canada's ability to control and maintain power over Canadian citizens. That's my hope, that Danielle Smith and David Eby and Scott Moe will come together and form some sort of economic alliance, because as much as BC doesn't want to admit it, they are very, very heavily reliant on their natural resource economy. And I think that they're going to wake up as this thing progresses and realize that they need to create an alliance with Alberta and Saskatchewan, and we all need to leave. That's my hope, as far-fetched as it may sound. So I don't have a lot of hope for Canada now. I'm still processing a lot of my emotions in the way that I feel. And it wasn't like I was a hardcore conservative and all I wanted was Pierre Poilievre. I wanted Poilievre because I think deep down inside, Poilievre at least is coming from the right place. Do I think he would have done a stellar job No, but I think he would have done good enough to steer us away from the abyss that we are falling into. But now we're here, and we've just begun to fall. And I think Canadians are about to find out how deep that hole really is. And that's it. I'm going to go now. Thank you for listening. Once again, if you haven't signed up yet, please subscribe, bravenewnormal.substack.com. You can sign up as a paid subscriber if you want to support me, or free if not, and you just want to read and listen to the podcast, which is cool too. For my paid subscribers listening, thank you guys. So many more people jumped on the last couple of weeks as I was running the gauntlet of this election and just putting out as many podcast episodes as I could during that time. A lot of new people, a lot of new paid subscribers signed up. So thank you guys. You all are paying my bills and keeping the lights on and supporting my family and ensuring that I can continue to do this. So thank you very much. I love you all. From the bottom of my heart, you have no idea how much you mean to me. And that's it. Have a great weekend, everybody. And stay vigilant, and I'm gonna try to pop back in with something a little more optimistic on the next one. But I just got to find that optimism first. So take care of yourselves and each other. Much love, and we'll see you soon. Peace.